Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and delighted to have back in the studio our resident researcher. John Mittendorf's with us today. He works with Answers in Genesis, and he does quite a few series here with us on theDove, and we're delighted to have him back today. But today's very special because he's taken the subject of Christmas and narrowed it down. And here's what I want to tell you in advance before we get into this. When we get done with these two segments, you may want to go back to the theDove website and pick them up there on YouTube. If you are a Roku user, it'll be on the Roku. And then share this program with your family and friends as we deal with Christmas 2013, Where is Your Focus? So anyway, I think you'll find this to be pretty resourceful. Hi, John.
Good morning, Perry. I thought we would just take a quick break from our series we started last month on Is There a God? How do you prove the existence of God?
Right.
Because this is December.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about it because I thought, you know, it seems like this year, more than any other year, the Christmas season started earlier.
Yeah.
You know, Christmas, in fact, the Christmas tree lots are full now. You walk into the malls, here's all the Christmas decorations before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Black Friday started early this year. And then what really grabbed my attention was when we got the Mail Tribune, you know, the last 3 or 4 days. That thing is about that thick, you know. By the time you pull all the ads out, you know, you get down to the paper, and the paper's about that thick, you know. So, you know, I think it's easy to get distracted from a secular viewpoint by the Christmas season with all of the hubbub and the traveling and the presents and getting ready, you know, and all that's fine. Yeah. But I think it does tend to dilute the real reason for Christmas and why are we really celebrating Christmas. And so,
well, we know that there's been a political correctness, and if not even an academic scrubbing of the meaning of Christmas. You know?
And taking Christmas out, you know. Yeah. I mean, you drive by the common Christmas tree lot, Xmas.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, I can't stand that.
Yeah, we replaced Christ with X. Yeah. And you're taking Christmas really out of the Christian society, so it's just being minimized to Satan's delight, so to speak. So I thought we'd just take a few minutes this morning and just stop and just refocus on Christmas and consider 3 major points. Where did the name of Christmas come from? What is the true gift of Christmas? And then maybe some popular misconceptions about Christmas. And probably one of the biggest misconceptions about Christmas is how many magi traveled to see Jesus. Was it 3? Because that's everything you see on Christmas cards and posters and everything. You always see 3 wise men or magi traveling to see Jesus. Is that really what the Scripture says? and of course the answer is no.
No, several of them.
No.
And you know what? When the angel, there's another part of it. Well, we'll get into it later.
Yeah.
I'll hold off. Because I discovered something reading the Christmas story the other day. I was reading in Luke, and I discovered another little thought in there.
You did? Go ahead. Shoot.
Well, when the angel appeared to the shepherds by night, then the next line is, then the angel and the host of heaven.
The host of heaven, which would be angelic. Beings, right?
So there is a great, first was the angel, then the whole host show up. Now, can you imagine these shepherds?
which are just common guys out in the fields with the sheep, right?
They're out there, you know, herding the sheep around. It's cold, it's night, and all that, and all of a sudden an angel appears. That's one thing.
That's one thing.
But then the heavenly host
right,
show up and start singing.
Right.
And expressing what God is saying to them.
Right.
I'm going, and by the way, it goes on to say, and his favor towards man, basically those who accept his son.
Right.
And I'm going, wow, can you imagine the experience the shepherds had? No wonder they left everything and started heading out.
And how many angelic hosts are there? Millions, millions,
host.
Billions. Yeah, host. Yeah. So, and the sky's probably lit up because they probably weren't in the dark, right?
Wouldn't you like to have an experience like that?
Oh boy, yeah.
Especially when you're going through a tough time, if God just kind of send an angel to appear in your room and talk to you like that?
Yeah, yeah.
By the way, that's the series I want to do with you sometime.
What's that?
Why was there easier conversations with God in the Old Testament?
Okay.
And even in the New Testament, they had conversations with God as if he was a person in the room. Why can't we experience that? Why
don't we handle that down the road?
All right, let's get into Christmas.
Okay, why don't we start off, where did the name of Christmas come from?
Well, I'm assuming it's Christ's Mass.
Right. Christ must, and of course Christ needs no definition, but mas means celebration. So basically, the name Christmas basically means Christ celebration or a celebration of Christ, which is basically what Christmas is. And it's interesting that when you say, okay, where did the name of Christmas come from, and when did the Christmas celebration really start, you might make a good case for the fact that the celebration started when the hosts of heavens, like you just talked about, started with the shepherds, and of course the angels were also praising God also. So I think we can make a case for that's where it started. But where did it start, let's say officially, on this planet? Because I'm going to say just for this discussion that the heavenly host doesn't count for right now because they were in the heavens, right?
Okay.
Okay, where did it start on this earth? And the answer is we don't know.
I was going to say, you can't pinpoint a day.
You don't, because we don't know the actual date of the birth of Christ.
You know the season?
Well, there's various viewpoints on that. So to lock down one, I don't really think you can do that as a categorical statement. As a categorical statement.
Because if you take the Eastern calendar versus the Western calendar, the Eastern calendar, say they're more traditional.
Yeah, see, then you get into the calendars and all that. So, but in doing a little bit of research, I came across that Christmas is first mentioned by the early church father Sextus Africanus as being celebrated in AD 221. So it was officially being celebrated then, about 200 years after Christ. Now, was it before then? Maybe, probably, but he mentions it in 221 AD, which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
However, you also, or sometimes you hear the fact, well, Christmas basically just came out of the Roman pagan holiday, Saturnalia.
Right.
And that is not correct because, from several viewpoints, I think it's going to be a stretch to say that pagans wanted to celebrate Christmas from Christ because basically rejection of Christ started back in Genesis with Adam and Eve. They basically introduced this world to sin, you know, when they sinned. And so I don't think you can make a case for that. And also Saturnalia, which was the pagan Roman holiday which celebrated their god Saturn, was celebrated December 17th through the 23rd. So we celebrate Christmas on the 25th. So yeah, you can debate that all day long. It's a little stretch to overlap the two. And as I said before, we don't really know when Christ was born, the exact date. And yeah, both the dates are close. And but the Gregorian calendar is where December 25th came from, basically.
Okay. Isn't it interesting, the four Gospels, Luke chapter 2, basically a vast majority of that whole chapter deals,
Matthew 1 and 2.
Deals with the birth of Christ. So it's important enough that all four Gospels talk about it.
Right.
You know, so obviously it's to be recognized.
Oh, definitely. But, you know, the key is, why do we celebrate Christmas? And this was the second point that I was going to bring up, is the true gift of Christmas. Why do we celebrate Christmas? Is it because we want to have Christmas trees, we want to have lights, we want to go shopping, we want to do Black Friday, we want to be busy and drive around and all of that that's easy to get wrapped up in? Or is it time to stop maybe this year for the first time and really reflect on why we're celebrating Christmas, and what is the true gift of Christmas? It's Christ. And it's God who came to earth as a man and died on a cross, took all of our sins so that we can have eternal life with him and escape damnation. And if you stop and think about that, is that a reason to celebrate something other than the secular spend money, spend money, spend money?
Well, we attached St. Nicholas to it and morphed him into something that he wasn't.
Well, you know, Perry,
well, he was for children, but I mean, you know, we made this other image out of it.
And you know, along with that, you have Santa Claus, and you got the elves, and you got Rudolph, and you got Charlie Brown Christmas, and all that. And all that's fine as long as you keep it in the proper perspective. But what I'm saying is it's easy to get wrapped up in the Christmas hubbub and the rush of the holidays. And by the way, there's a name you're starting to hear more and more and more now. Is holidays. season's greetings. You're seeing less and less of an emphasis on the word Christmas, which is a celebration of Christ. And so I think in 2013, yeah, you know, we can still have a Christmas tree, still have presents, and enjoy all the things I think that the season brings, but I think there should also be an emphasis, particularly from each family, is why are we really celebrating Christmas and what the Christmas celebration really means and what the focus on that should really be. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think it puts a whole different spin on Christmas, and also I think tends to slow you down and draw you away from the secular approach of that.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see some signs now of the lack of materialism because it's so unfulfilling. We saw Black Friday this last...
Let me stop you just for a second. Yeah. When you say it's so unfulfilling, particularly when your next Visa bill comes the next month, right?
Well, yeah, buyer's remorse. Yeah. But I think now with all the problems in the world, people are asking deeper questions than, you know, what I want for Christmas or what, you know, what we need. I think people are saying, all right, what's this all about? Why do we do this? What's this really mean? Yeah. So the opportunities are... All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, there's some very common Christmas misconceptions, and we're here to kind of twist your brain a little bit on some things that you just maybe have just taken for granted, or you just taken as commonality, when in fact there's some things in there that aren't quite right. We'll straighten that out for you when we come back with John Mittendorf.
Not quite.
We're back with John Mittendorf, and John is here today. Of course, he's our resident researcher, and he works with Answers in Genesis. By the way, John's available to do seminars in your church. I would recommend for your any of your Sunday school classes, or just come in and take an evening or Wednesday night service and do any of the seminars that he does on evolution versus creation. It's fascinating. Today, we're just taking the subject of Christmas and trying to deal with its obvious meaning and its purpose. And there's a list here that John has put together, some common Christmas, misconceptions.
Misconceptions, right.
All right, let's get into those real
quick. Out
of
Matthew and Luke. Okay, let me go down these just real quick, Perry, and then while I go down these, the people that are watching and listening, they can also think about this just for a second, because this is common stuff. When Mary and Joseph arrived in town, Mary was in labor, so Joseph was forced to accept any available lodging. True or false? You've got the notes, so you're ahead of this game just a little bit here.
Not true.
That's false.
Okay.
Luke 2:6 indicates that, and I'm quoting, "So it was that while they were there, they had already been there." Oh. And why were they there? They were there because of the census. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. While they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. Right. So they had been there for a period of time. It doesn't tell us how much, but they had been there. That it came time for her to be delivered. So that kind of eliminates that one. Number two, the New Testament uses the Greek word kataluma that is translated as inn. Therefore, kataluma means small hotel. And you've probably heard the phrase, well, when they got into town, they went to the inn, knocked on the door, and the innkeeper came out and said, well, there's no room. And so then they looked around, they finally found the manger, and then while they were in the manger that night, that the innkeeper's wife came out and brought him towels and water and helped her deliver.
Yeah.
False.
Okay. All right. What happened?
The Greek word kataluma is best translated as guest room. And we know from archaeology now that a lot of the houses, and particularly in that area, you could have a multi-story house or even a single-story house, but they would have like a room underneath the house that they use for the animals. And they would use that to protect the animals during the winter and also provide a little additional warmth for the house. So most likely, that's where they were. Even if they were in a house of a relative, which makes sense because if you were going to go to Jerusalem for the census, you would probably stay or lodge with relatives of your family, correct? So that is a very real possibility. So it's also a very real possibility because the house or the rooms are already taken, that they wound up in the, let's say, the downstairs room, which would have been for the animals, which was underneath the house, basically. Okay?
So that's just a minor adjustment.
Just a
major thing. It's just a minor thing.
Minor adjustment, right.
Okay, all right.
The New Testament indicates, and this is a question, that Joseph and Mary spent the first night in a stable. True or false?
I'm trying to think of the story.
Well, false.
Okay.
There is no biblical mention of a stable, only a manger.
Okay.
So if we go back to the room concept underneath the house for the animals, basically manger can be described as a feeding trough for the animals, which is a common picture that you see. That is correct. That is correct.
Right.
Okay. So that also makes sense. Today we're aware through archaeology that the common home, as we just mentioned, was over a manger type area for animals.
Okay.
And additionally, manger was generally the term used for a feeding trough for animals. So that portion is correct.
Okay.
That portion is correct, okay? The bottom line is that when Christ came to this earth, he came in the most humblest portion or area possible.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't born into an Egyptian hierarchy like Moses was. No, he started right at the bottom, right with the common folk.
Okay. With the animals.
Yeah, with the animals, yeah.
Okay.
Next, the New Testament indicates that the innkeeper told Joseph and Mary there was no room for them in the inn. True or false?
True.
False.
False.
The biblical account does not mention an innkeeper at all. Now you got to read Matthew and Luke.
Okay.
An innkeeper is not mentioned.
What's it say?
It just says, I'll go back to Luke 2:6, indicates that so it was while they were there, the days for her to be completed, and she delivered. There's no innkeeper mentioned. Interesting.
I don't have my Bible here to challenge him, so I don't.
You're going to have to trust me on that one.
Okay.
Okay. Next question. Some stories indicate the innkeeper's wife brought towels and water to Mary and assisted Joseph in the birth of the baby Jesus. False. Again, there is no mention of an innkeeper's wife in the biblical account.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. Pretty simple. But I think it shows you how the Christmas story has evolved, although it's somewhat true. And we're coming to the next one, which is the Magi. That one is not true either.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay, but is it biblically accurate? Not really. Not really. Okay, next question. The New Testament says 3 wise men traveled to see the new baby Jesus and were present the night of his birth. True or false?
No, that's not true.
That is false. Matthew 2:1 indicates wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. Could have been 5, could have been 10, could have been 15. Where the 3 comes from is the presents that they presented to Jesus, which was gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And that's where the 3 comes from.
Right.
Yeah.
When in reality it was several months later, wasn't it?
Well, you know, it could have been up to 2 years later because, and this brings up a whole other question, Perry, is the star. And you're seeing some information now that people feel the star was a supernova and a comet and all this stuff. But I think a lot of apologists don't think that's correct because basically the only people that saw the star were the wise men because Herod had to ask them about the star. The Magi knew, Herod did not. So if it would have been a supernova, if it would have been something like that, everybody would have seen it, when in reality, basically only the Magi were the ones that saw it. So they were the ones, and it led them to Jerusalem, and it actually at the end stayed right over the house. So they knew exactly where the house was that Jesus was, because you remember Herod, as a result of meeting the Magi, wanted to kill all the children 2 years or under. So the Magi came from the Far East, and they feel that's probably Persia. And so how long would have taken them on camels to go from Persia, see? And so it wasn't within a day or two of Jesus. It could have been up to 2 years later. Up to 2 years later. So Jesus could have been a 2-year-old boy by the time the Magi came, which is not really ultra important. It's just that we tend to think that you see, here's Mary, here's the baby Jesus in the manger, and here's the Magi there with their 3 gifts.
Yeah, the typical nativity scene.
A typical nativity scene.
Right.
Yeah, that's okay, but that's not really biblically accurate. So does that really take away from the biblical story?
No.
Not really. Not really.
All right.
Lastly, and this one you hear occasionally, true or false? The Christmas tree represents the Asherah pole, which was mentioned. It's mentioned all the time in the Old Testament. It represents the Asherah poles mentioned in the Old Testament.
No.
And that is totally false, because the Christmas tree is a German tradition introduced by Prince Albert in 1841. So it's got nothing to do with secular, the secular argument, well, Christmas is basically out of the pagan holiday Saturnalia. No, it's not. Well, your Christmas tree is an outgrowth of the Asherah pole in the Old Testament. No, it's not. Basically, Christmas is a celebration and a worship of Christ, Christmas, which is a celebration of Christ, and that's basically what Christmas is. And you know what's interesting? I think when you look at all of the holidays throughout the year, Easter, Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, Labor Day, and the rest, even Veterans Day and so on, are they all important? Yes. Why? Because it gives us a time to stop and reflect on what that day is, if we do that. But I think it's unarguable that probably the top holiday of the year is what? Christmas.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a worship, a remembrance, a celebration of what Christ did for us. And that is the key.
Well, and it's really an incredible opportunity to share Christ.
Oh, particularly, particularly, you know, Perry, that's really a good point, because particularly with the family, in a lot of family gatherings, and you'll have a large family gathering in a lot of cases in homes, that you can have a percentage of non-Christians there, and to stop and say, what does Christmas really mean to you, or what are you thankful for this year? And even though a person is not a Christian, they have to stop and think and reflect. On what happened 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I really hope that the least of which we take advantage, if I can use that word, of Christmas to witness, to share Christ, to share what he means. The best story you can share with anybody is what Christ has done for you. And, you know, this, again, if you need one of our devotionals as a tool to share Christ with somebody, if somebody say, what's Christmas mean to you? So, well, read this.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
You know, or something like that. Watch the Dove, or read chapter 2 of Luke, or something like that. I think there is a hunger, John, especially here at the Dove. We get a lot of phone calls and emails, and when you boil it down and you begin to look through there and you sift it down to what are these people saying, it comes down to two questions. Who can I trust? And what is truth?
And what is truth?
And what is truth? Those are the two things that people are starving for. And Christ is the answer to both. And I would say that Christmas becomes one of our greatest opportunities to witness. You know?
Would you say that the search for truth is probably even more important now because the political landscape,
right,
which to a large degree has been a foundation of this country, is in such a mess, and it's just become common that somebody gets caught doing something, well, I didn't do that, and you can trust me, and then we come to find out that's not true at all. And it's just becoming more and more common that the leaders in Washington, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or Independent, doesn't make any difference, that everything is in a mess and getting worse. And so, as you say, what is truth? What is real?
What is truth? And people want to be able to trust something. And the systems, you can't trust the systems, but you can trust Christ.
Right.
You can't trust the politicians, but you can trust Christ. And that doesn't mean, that's a broad statement, that doesn't mean they're all bad. But what I'm saying is that it's the greatest opportunity we have as believers to share Christ is this time of the year.
Yeah.
You know, and I hope we take full advantage of it. By the way, mention your book quickly as we
a great book on this subject, if people are interested in this program this morning, is The War on Christmas by Bodie Hodge, and that's a Master Books book. It's a very well done book, and it takes you through the entire Christmas process.
Okay, and that's available at where?
Master Books. You can get that from Answers in Genesis.
Okay, all right, there you go. Answers in Genesis. John, thank you, and Merry Christmas.
Well, Merry Christmas to you, the staff, and actually to all the listeners of the Dove.
God bless you.